Hello, my name is Rachel Pinedo, and I will be doing a PowerPoint presentation on the Presidential Cabinet. This PowerPoint will consist of an overview of President Obama's cabinet, as well as President-elect Donald Trump's appointed cabinet, and there will also be a civil service comparison to the cabinet positions. This is our Vice President Joe Biden. He is the first to power if anything were to happen to President Obama. So, thank God that didn't happen. But Vice President Joe Biden would have been there to fulfill the president position if anything were to happen. Next, here we have the Department of State Secretary John Kerry. This is Secretary Jack Lew, and this is the Department of Treasury. Next up, we have Secretary Ashton Carter, the Department of Defense. Next, we have Attorney General Loretta E. Lynch. She is the Department of Justice. That sounds cool. Next up, we have Secretary Sally Jewell. She is the Department of Interior. Next, we have Secretary Thomas Vilsack, the Department of Agriculture. Next, we have Secretary Penny, I hope I don't say this wrong, Pritzker. I'm sorry if I did. And she is the Secretary for the Department of Commerce. This is Secretary Thomas Perez, and he is representing the Department of Labor. In the Department of Health and Human Services, we have Secretary Sylvia Matthews Burnwell. This is Julian Castro, the Secretary for the Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD. Next up, we have Secretary Anthony Fox. He's a Secretary for the Department of Transportation. This is Secretary Ernest Moniz. He is the Secretary for the Department of Energy. This is representing the Department of Education. This is Secretary John King. Next, we have Secretary Robert McDonald representing the Veteran Affairs, the Department of Veteran Affairs, And last, we have Jeh Johnson. He is the Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security. I think this is the newest cabinet member added after 9/11, I believe. Here we have our President-elect Donald Trump's appointed cabinet members. Here we have Mike Pence, our Vice President. And then we have Rex Tillerson, the Department of State. We have Stephen, I hope I don't say this wrong, Munchin, representing the Department of Treasury. We have General James Mathis, Department of Defense. Senator Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General for the Department of Justice. Next, we have Representative Ryan Zink for the Department of Interior. Agriculture has not been represented yet. Wilbur Ross, he will be the Secretary for the Department of Commerce. Next, we have Andrew Pudzer. I hope I don't say that wrong. I'm sorry if I did. Representing the Department of Defense. We have Tom Price representing the Health and Human Services Department. Next, we have Ben Carlson representing the Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD. Next, we have Elaine Chao. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. Representing the Department of Transportation, we have Rick Perry, appointed to be the Secretary of the Department of Energy. We have Betsy DeVos, Department of Education. Veteran Affairs has not been appointed yet. And lastly, we have John F. Kelly, representing Homeland Security. I feel like there's a lot to be said about comparing civil service to the executive branch. I think in ways they are similar in an aspect where they represent a group larger than themselves. Civil service people, they represent a community, they represent a population that is much smaller, of course, than the executive branch. But in a sense, they're still, a lot of cities, their city councils are broken up into divisions to represent different areas of the city because the demographics are so different. And so they want to represent each culture, I should say, in their, in their decision making, and that kind of filters into the executive branch as well, because our presidential cabinet members are representing different workforces and different departments that are serving important aspects that serve the American life and keep us running smoothly and living life as we know it, so to speak. And if any presidential matters need to be made, or any decisions need to be made by the president, these cabinet members are there to represent those decisions and to make sure that their departments are represented well, and hopefully the best decisions can be made to serve the nation as a whole. And so I feel like they serve. They're still public servants on very different levels. Executive branches serve the nation, as civil service represents smaller communities. But nonetheless, they're still representing areas that are more than just themselves. And so I think that's a lot, that there's something to be said about these individuals, because a lot of times they're working more out of compassion than personal gain. And because I don't think, I don't know, I feel like it takes a certain person to keep doing this, because a lot of times the stresses are, you know, it's more than what it's worth sometimes, but you're representing more than just yourself, so you just keep doing it. So yeah, I think that kind of fulfills my my PowerPoint, and thank you so much. If there's any questions, feel free to please contact me, email, comment. I welcome feedback. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. Thank you so much.